when you design for scale, it is different from scaling up. When you scale up, you staff up. But when you design for scale, you use the system. So today we embed ourselves within the education department. We are there to work in collaboration using the government machinery, using government functionaries as our force multiplier.
Welcome back, everybody. Richard Baker, founder of Collective Responsibility, here today with another episode of the Sustainable Ambassador Podcast. Through this podcast, I'm speaking with global leaders in the corporate, nonprofit, academic, civil services, talking about the work they're doing to affect change across the challenges they're seeing in their communities, economies, and environments. In this episode, I'm extremely excited to have Ratna Viswanathan, who is the CEO of Reach for Teach. Reach for Teach is an organization that partners with state governments and other organizations on strengthening comprehensive learning outcomes. Prior to her work at Reach for Teach, she has more than 35 years of experience in civil service, development, microfinance, environment, and education sectors. So we're talking to a true leader who has a lot of rich experience in various numbers of backgrounds. So with that, Ratna, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. It's really great to have you with us.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much for having me here.
So as a starting point, we always like to start with a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing at Reach to Teach.
Okay, I can start off with a little bit about myself. I started working 38 years ago, actually. I joined the civil services in 1987, and I was part of the Comptroller and Auditor General's office for about 21 years, but I did secondments during that time with defense. I spent about 6 years in the defense ministry, and then I was with the public broadcasting system for a while. And then in 2008, I took the plunge. After about 2 decades with the government, I thought, let me join the development sector. Every civil servant I know has a dream at the back of their head of joining the development sector one day. And I was the one that jumped. None of this is planned. It's just that a headhunter approached me and I'm like, I always wanted to go there. I finished 21 years, so why not? And after that, then I worked with another UK charity called VSO for a while. And then I was the CEO of the for-profit microfinance network for about 4 years, and I led the sector through demonetization. Post that, I worked with the UN for a while. So UNEP for about 6 months and UNDP for about 18 months. And again, I got headhunted for Reach to Teach. Came in kicking and screaming because I'd really never worked with education before. But I asked them, I said, of course I went to school, but that's about all the exposure I've had. So why do you want somebody like me? So they said, we want somebody who will set up systems for us. And you seem to have a background in setting up systems all the time. And so that's pretty much how I landed here in Reach to Teach. And I completed 5 years this April. So yeah, I love it and I'm not going anywhere.
That's awesome. All right. So I'm going to go back a little bit. I'm going to ask you, you were one of the only who aspire that basically achieved the dream of jumping out of government and going into another sector. Why were you the one? Like, what was it at the time that said, okay, I'm going to do this? Was it you were comfortable and so you decided to make a shift, or it was just something that you saw on the street or in your community that made you catalyze? Like, what was it that drove you to make the jump that others seemingly aren't ready to or are unwilling to?
And I'd been in the government for 21 years, and I can guarantee you there's nothing teaches you at the magnitude and the width that government does. You have a ringside view of everything that happens in a country, right? And it also teaches you how to deal with people because in government, neither can you fire, neither can you incentivize. So you have to like really know how to get people to deliver and do work. You have to work with what you have. So I think that that kind of learning is impossible to achieve anywhere else. Having said that, then that becomes a repetitive pattern and you really want to be able to do something different. And like I told you, I don't plan things. I'm always curious, and I was really curious to do something different. And the one thing that the development sector does is bring you one step closer to people on the ground, which while you are in government, you do policy, you do advocacy, you do all of that, but it's always one removed because you're taking decisions on secondhand information and not really talking to people on the ground in that sense. right? So I think that was the other factor that, made me move. And I remember a lot of my course mates calling me insane, saying, why would you leave the security of the government and jump ships to sector where, there is no stability? And it's like, if one sticks to stability, I think you lose out a lot in life. There is a huge world out there and there is so much to do. How can you just be stuck in one place? And so that's why I jump ship. Yeah.
And then after you jump ship, you ended up kind of going through a number of different roles. So through each role, were you kind of learning were you trying to constantly learn new things and said, look, I've been here 3 to 5 years, I'm going to go somewhere else? Or was it just opportunity knocked and you're like, hey, I'm curious, make a shift?
So after Oxfam, I was in Oxfam for about 4 years, and I realized there was a pattern. So when you're used to working in an organization where every 3 years you're changing what you're doing and learning something new, after 4 years, the pattern started repeating. And then I can never say, I mean, I will never be arrogant enough to say that, oh, you know what, I'd learned everything I needed to. It never happens. It's just that I thought maybe if I move to another organization, I could rebuild and do things in a different manner.
When you first came into the sector out of government service, what was your mindset? Like what was it like coming out of the government sector into this space of nonprofits, for good, mission driven oriented organizations? And what did you bring into the sector that you think was really additive, that the sector is really, that you find is benefiting that others don't have?
So, a couple of things. One is government has very solid processes in place, and they are so much in the background, you really don't think about it. And that's how the machinery runs so smoothly because it is so deeply entrenched. When you come out, you realize no matter how big the organization, that kind of, steel framework does not exist. And you realize that if you're working in an organization that works with the most vulnerable of the population, you do need to have proper systems in place to ensure that whatever it is you're doing, whatever it is you're building, whatever it is that you're formulating, there is enough governance, there is enough framework, knowledge, management of knowledge, etc. That because unlike government, which has long and very deep institutional memory, a lot of organizations beyond the government do not build institutional memory. So a lot of it goes away with the people who have been driving processes when they leave. So that was something I think I realized when I joined, and we started putting in place proper, let's say a HR manual, for instance, or a finance manual, things around recruitment, things around promotions. So now I'm coming from government where we have a clear, succession career path. And so if you really need to retain staff, it seems logical that you also build that into your frameworks because then there is something for them to look forward to. Everybody doesn't look at just money rising, they also want to see themselves growing in their jobs. So, all of this, I think, I kind of brought into the sector, but also from the sector, I learned a lot. I learned much softer skills, for instance, handling much smaller numbers of people but doing it in a manner which was definitely more proactive and where you had to really listen, you had to be sensitive to people's needs, you had to be sensitive to how you basically had to learn how to read the room. And I think what I learned is humility, how to engage with people at a level which was on an equal footing. And I'll tell you what made me really happy. For the first time, nobody was calling me ma'am. Everybody called me by name. And I'm like, yeah, I like this.
But I'm curious how, because now you're working for an organization that's working with the government to solve a government and a country challenge, and they're coming to you for answers. So can you talk a little bit about the work of Reach to Teach, but also the challenge, like the challenge of not just educating, young Indian, primary, secondary, but also making sure that they're fit for purpose in this world where we're going to AI and to really uncertain, economy, like a little bit of the work that you're doing, and like what's the size and challenge that you see in terms of moving beyond, say, the old rudimentary education and the old literacy scores into, actual tool sets and mindsets for success?
We had been working in the field for over 12 and a half years, and we realized that we needed to take all that learning to reach a much larger number of children in a country where more than half your population is going to under-resourced schools. And when I say under-resourced, they're really under-resourced. So that's how we moved from working, in the field to signing memorandum of understanding with different governments. We work with 4 state governments right now, and we actually reach a population of about 7.5 million children. And the way we do it is we don't staff up. And that's why when I said when you design for scale, it is different from scaling up. When you scale up, you staff up. But when you design for scale, you use the system. So today we embed ourselves within the education department as true partners and work in a collaborative way. We are not there to name and shame the government. We are there to work in collaboration using the government machinery, using government functionaries as our force multiplier rather than hiring people from the outside. And we start with the teachers because we feel that they are key. Typically, the government teacher in a country like India is apathetic. They get paid whether they work or not, there's nothing driving them. So, to get them to come alive is such a challenge. And to be able to do that, the first thing you have to do is make sure they're heard. And that's where we began. We have a hub and spoke model where we design at the head office. Each state that we work in, we have a small project team that sits there within the department to constantly handhold. So, the way we've designed it is we have bespoke telephone helplines in case anybody at all wants to reach out. We create communities of practice through WhatsApp groups. The simplest way to do it, but so powerful because you've created a space where there's peer-to-peer interaction which didn't exist before. So peer-to-peer interaction, yes, of course, to share good practice, but also a place to share anxiety, a place to ask questions. It goes way beyond. So when we keep talking about socio-emotional learning, they can be created very simply because after all, it's human beings need to be heard. And it doesn't require a very complex mechanism to do that. It doesn't require hours of pedagogy and studies to do that. It just requires you to stand and think, if I was in that place, what would I want?
I find it really interesting that you are so actively working with the government. I've started several nonprofits, and I've been arguing for years that our exit should be to government infrastructure, because at the end of the day, they have the ability to really, what I liked how you said scale up versus scale, like using the system versus staffing up a scale. Like I really like that idea, and I actually viewed the same. Like, why would you spend so much time rebuilding infrastructure when government has that there, and you can work with them to hopefully activate it? Now, of course, as you mentioned, it can be a bit slow. Some people are apathetic. Like the incentives are, but if you can make it work, isn't that a better outcome? And so, I'm curious, was that something that you came to after years of other practice, or was that something that you inherently understood because you came from the government sector and were like, look, this is a great marriage, like we need to make a change, and you made that happen because of your old experience meeting your new organizations?
People generally tend to come to government with problems, but you could come to government with solutions as well. And when you come with solutions, they're listening. So that was the approach. And I think what really worked for us was by being excessively consultative and not just at the senior levels, but right down to the lowest levels of the department so that every functionary was a part of the design process. So typically in India, you have a revolving door policy where the secretary of the department gets transferred every 3 years. Now, to create long-term sustainability, it has to be embedded within the department. So you have to make sure that you work at every level so that there is ownership, there is buy-in, there's skin in the game because you're designing together, you're building together. And the same work for teachers as well. Typically, the curriculum, the syllabus, even lesson plans are designed elsewhere, and teachers are just asked to roll it out. Now, who knows their work better than the teacher themselves? They also are the. Now, for me to come in saying, I will tell you what to do is, I think, extremely presumptuous because they know. And when you say that I want to build the capacity of teachers, you're coming from an assumption that they have no capacity. But that's not true. You can strengthen capacity. You can, reset capacity, but you can't build capacity. They already have it. So I think it's really important to recognize the skills that teachers have because however good, your collateral is, your design is, they are key. If they are not interested, if they're not buying into the game, and if they're not being a part of the whole process of rolling it out, children are never going to learn.
Does working with the government so deeply also slow down your mission, or is that an acceptable balance to your mission personally and to the organization?
Honestly, government is equally keen to produce results. And so we have found that very often they are the core facilitators to get things moving fast. And but I think what is critical is that you have to establish that relationship first. You must earn trust. The moment you earn trust, you are a part of the system. And if they let you within the system, then you actually have the legitimacy to drive all the good work that you want to drive. Whereas if you do it outside in little pockets of excellence, you are at the mercy of the local level functionaries. You are at the mercy of district administration. They change, people change. A lot of it is personality driven. So that's exactly what I mean when I say that, doing work in pockets of excellence is very different from designing for scale.
Now, how do you build trust? How do you prove value, not just to the local officials, but to groups above them? Like what is the work that goes into that? I mean, a lot of people say, oh, it's just a lot of, dinners and hobnobbing and, relationship building. But is there data do they want to see? Is it reports they want to see? Do they want to go on site? Like, what's the ways that you found to be the most valuable or the most efficient for building trust and also making sure that as they move, your relationships also grow and they don't have to restart every 3 years?
Richard, there are no dinners. Let's be honest. I wish there were, but there are none. I think what really works is that you have something to go to them with, show it to them, talk them through it, convince them that it's a design that works. And if they are convinced, they let you in. Having said that, I think it's also fair to mention that it's more like a co-funded model because whereas I pick up my own costs, that's all the costs I pick up. The other costs, like we design textbooks, the state then prints and distributes those textbooks. The state takes on the cost of bringing teachers to a place where we can train them. The state takes on the cost of organizing, different kind of, what shall I say, orientation and induction processes. The entire cost of that is borne by the state. For me, that's great validation, which means that if I'm spending 1x, the state is spending 3 or 4x. And that is really what matters to me, that they believe enough to then spend that money because they think your design is going to lead to a certain change. And like I told you, it's government to government, and the secretary is the one that changes. The secretary of the department is the one that changes every 3 years, which is why it's really important to build relationships down the line, which is because when the new person comes in, It is this body that will say, oh, we are working with so and so, and this is what they've done so far. So you're not starting from ground zero.
There's a lot of uncertainty in this space right now in terms of like the future of education, what should we be teaching our kids, what the future of their jobs looks like. Just more macro, like what does an economy look like for a country, and then how to bring its people back. Is this uncertainty driving more interest in your programs? Does it make it easier for you to say, look, we have a solution for you, or we want to work with you, and those collaborations are moving a little bit quicker now? Or like how does that dynamic change things?
We look at education as a supply chain. You start at grade 1 and you learn things, and the complexity of what you're learning keeps going up that chain till you reach grade 12, right? So you can't say that I will strengthen foundation literacy and numeracy, which is primary school, which is classes 1 to 4, but I'm not funding anything else. You can't say that I will fund STEM education for girls, but I will not fund anything else. What ends up happening is then what happens to them after the foundational literacy and numeracy? Because children don't go to work after class 5. They need to go on till the end, till grade 12, right? So this is a pattern we've noticed, and it's something you keep pushing back and battling against, because I think there is a need to understand education is a continuum. It's not bits and bobs, right? Now, the children we work with, they come from low income households and they go to under resourced schools. So the largest part of this population does a school to work transition. Very few of them go on to higher education, which is why it's really important that you strengthen the whole process and not pick out pieces. Having said that, we do a lot of, like, we do a particular kind of skilling for girls where they can get absorbed in their geographies, looking at it from an equity aspect. But that doesn't mean boys don't have to be trained. So what we do is that from the 9th to the 12th grade, we put a lot of focus on skill orientation, financial literacy. And thanks to my microfinance background, I do realize how critical it is for young children to understand financial literacy. We did a learning gap assessment. And then, based on the learning gap assessment, we created activities, subject wise, grade wise, which was part of your textbook. What happened was there was a interactive process that came into play. And I think what we've done is by using new processes, by designing things for children from 9th to 12th, for instance, we focus a lot more on skilling and vocational orientation than we do for younger grades. Financial literacy now we're putting into the syllabus starting from grade 5, when children who are 10 years old start learning. And like I say, the complexity keeps going up. And for the 9 to the 12, then our next phase is where we're looking at getting them involved with local industry.
But what's the challenge that you as a leader or as an organization faces to understand, say, the future and where things are headed? Because I teach at executive, master's, undergrad. I have a high schooler. When I interact with most, academians, teachers, principals, they don't really have a good sense for where the world is headed. And I think that's actually one of the big challenges. Like, how do you teach the skills for the future when you don't even understand where things are really headed? So what's the challenge that you guys face? Is it just we can provide skills for the next 2, 3, 5 years that we're certain of? Do you think too much beyond that? Or how do you balance that? Or how do you approach that challenge?
Access to digital pathways is something that is opening up doors for even teachers, children definitely, for even teachers to look at things differently, to do self-learning if they have the wherewithal. But the thing is, I think what really is critical, Richard, is you have to make them feel enthusiastic about it. You can't just say, I want you to do X cause. I need to be, how shall I say, prepped up in such a way that I want to do it. And I think when you introduce this as part of course content, the teachers themselves see a lot of value. because it also would help them enhance their skills. And today with things, and there's this constant question, can AI replace teachers? Is AI the new future? And honestly, Richard, no. The human being is the most unpredictable creature under the sun and reacts to different stimuli differently on different days. What does AI do? It just takes data points and puts it together. It cannot think. It cannot give you comfort. It doesn't understand emotion. It doesn't understand the need to handhold and sustain. So teachers can never be replaced. And I think, that fear that, oh, will AI replace teachers? It's a tool. It's a very smart tool, maybe sometimes not that smart. And one has to know how to use it. And at the end of the day, as it progresses, people will realize it's not AI, but the querying you do that is the actual crux of using it.
And I use AI in my classes, and I've realized that you have to almost be a domain expert now in whatever you're teaching. You can't be saying you can't be educated as a teacher anymore. Say, like in primary school, you can be educated to teach math. Now it's almost like you have to be a mathematician that can learn how to teach to effectively use these tools. So there is that transition, which will be uncomfortable for a lot of people that are currently in classrooms.
A large part of the teachers actually learn to use digital, platforms during COVID because there was no other way. And so they learned it the hard way. And thankfully, because of that learning, at least now you don't start at the bottom. There is a certain understanding of how to use computers, how to use smartphones, etc. For, whether it's for teaching, whether it's for, delivering content, whatever. But I think the entire ecosystem needs to strengthen to come to terms with what more advanced countries are doing in terms of classrooms, in terms of what, in India, we have at about 15% of Indian children go to very high-end schools, which have access to everything. So they learn very differently from children who go to affordable budget schools or to low resource government schools. So there's a gap there, and there's a need to catch up on that gap as well, whether it's for teachers or children. And I think everybody is working to the best possible way they can to see how and where these gaps can be addressed, which is why we have a new education, national education policy 2020, which focuses a lot more on higher order thinking and other more intuitive skills in terms of how children learn. But having said that, you still have that bunch of crazy parents out there who want their children to get 100%. So you have to fight that battle first before you.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about this is also I'm going to talk about is like how long is this gap itself sustainable? Like, if you have the 10 to 15% who have access to all the best tools, their teachers are fully aware and able to leverage these tools, but then the state is bearing the responsibility for the next 85%. Like, that creates a challenging situation. How do you think that, like, these public schools, like they're under resourced? So what's the answer to that? Is that the state will just give more budget to those because this is unsustainable, or is it a new model that we're going to see? Like, how do you? Because I don't feel like that is sustainable. How does it shift?
All of the It's going to be slow. It cannot catch up quickly because the disparities are too much. Government spending priorities are defined by a host of other things, so you can't keep saying they have to give more to education. And I think this is also where private players need to come in. The whole thing around CSR. Today, India is one of the countries that is CSR as a mandate. It's legislated. Now, if that was used in a more structured, in a more conscious way, rather than driven by, like, I will do things only in my catchment area, I will only work with those entities that work for me. That's brilliant because it has to be a collaborative effort. It cannot just be the government. It has to be the private sector, it has to be government, it has to be intergovernmental agencies like the World Bank or the IMF or.
Well, this is a conversation I have more frequently. I won't say India specifically. Is that we have a lot of governments that are facing really tough constraints. Their budgets are constrained. They're facing multiple real issues of human, environment, economy. And like you said, if they could spend more money, certainly they would. But this is where actually I think that more opportunities for collaborations exist. Like your organizations should see the government say, look, we can't actually, we don't have enough resources, and we finally recognize that we can't do it all. So we're gonna find other models, and they're gonna start privatizing, for lack of a better word, more of these challenges to organizations that have the ability to fund, outside of the government's kind of infrastructure. But it's going to be a slow balance. And again, like I won't say that's specific to India or any one country. I just see that generally happening. A lot of Southeast Asia is starting to work on that. China's been working on that. Like the US is the opposite model where everything's so privatized that it actually has its own challenges. So I feel like that's a really interesting kind of space to be in. There's a lot of opportunities.
Privatization is also something that one needs to approach cautiously, because when you're looking at a population, a large part of the population, I mean, India, we're a very strange country. We are now supposedly the third largest economy or the fourth largest economy, I forget which, in the world, but we also have a large population that still is, fighting for access to essential services. So that dichotomy is a difficult dichotomy. And to bridge that gap, I think needs a lot more than just government spending. It has to be, or private spending. It has to be, something that has to be looked at differently, not in the way that we're doing now, but differently, because it's a complex gap. And it's not a gap that I say, oh, 2030 and I've achieved my SDGs. Not that easy.
Yeah. No, I think it's going to be an opportunity for new models. And I'm saying like privatization, it's not the right word. There's something that's going to come out. It's like public-private partnership. I don't think that's it. It's just like, but there'll be a new model where the government says like, look, we really need more help. We're going to give up a little bit of control and a little bit of the idea that we have the infrastructure. Like they're going to try and find those hybrid models. And I think that's just an opportunity for people at the leading edge.
Some states are moving in that direction. They are creating, residential models, which then they're getting private people to come in and run. I think there are different models that are being tried out in different states, and we'll have to see what works, what doesn't, but it's a long road. That's all I can say. But having said that, this is a sector I've completely and wholly fallen in love with, because there's never going to be time, to do enough. There's never ever going to be time.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time as well. I want to ask you one last question, which is, with that in mind, if you were talking to another individual that was similar to you, they spent some time in government, they're looking to, like they're hesitant, they have this dream, but they're hesitant. What are 2 or 3 reasons you'd give them for jumping off the cliff and enjoying the ride on the way down?
Well, first of all, a leap of faith. You have to believe that what you're doing, you will achieve what you're setting out to do. That's one. You have to have faith, because if you have doubt, then and I believe this truly, Richard, if you have doubt, you're constantly on the back foot, right? So you have to take that leap of faith and believe that you can make that change. Believe that all your learning, all your access, all of it can be used to deliver something good. I think once you believe, that's where you start from. It's very easy to say that, oh, I did it so easily. It was not easy. It wasn't easy at all. But enormous amounts of learning, and I have absolutely no regrets that I left.
What are 3 things that you've learned that if other people knew, they'd have a little bit more faith in themselves?
Trust. You have to trust the people you work with. You definitely have to respect the people you work with. And it has to be a flat approach. Hierarchies in these kind of spaces don't work, because everybody has ideas. And to say that I'm older or I'm more experienced is actually so outdated, because the kind of ideas young people come in with now, you don't think of those, you haven't even thought of them, right? Because their exposure is very different from the way you grew up. So I think these 3 are the main factors. One, of course, trust. The other is respect. And the third, that everybody knows something and has value to add.